Welcome to Girl Choose Yourself, where we're trading self-doubt for self-trust and settling for soaring. I'm your host, Emer Zone, and together here we're building the confidence to create lives so deliciously bold that they scare us a little. In the best possible way, of course, because life's too damn precious and too short to stay cozy in our comfort zones. It is time to choose ourselves for life so damn fabulous and soulfully fulfilling that we have to keep pinching ourselves to check if we're dreaming. Let's do this. So welcome to this episode of Girl Choose Yourself. And today I'm really happy to be introducing you to Deborah, who's a mindset and confidence coach, particularly working with women who have gone through a divorce and helping them to regain their confidence and reconnect to their self-worth and sense of self-empowerment so that they can build really vibrant next chapters. She's also a mom. She's been widowed and she's been twice divorced herself. She's originally from South Africa and she currently lives in the UK. So welcome, Deborah. It's lovely to have you here. And I didn't check with you how to pronounce your surname, which is why I decided not to use that. So tell everybody what your surname is.
Oh, okay. My surname is Blignaut, if you pronounce it properly. However, because I'm in the UK, a lot of people struggle with the so they say Blignaut.
That was what I was going to go with. So I'm glad I didn't try to do my
No, that's fine. I don't mind. There's so many different ways of pronouncing it. But yes, Deborah Blignaut.
Well, as somebody whose first name is Emer, I'm kind of well aware of, the variations that you can get. So welcome. I'm so excited to be talking to you. And I'm really interested in jumping into your own journey because you yourself were married very young and divorced quite young too. And I just think your own story is so inspirational, and you're such a natural person to be able to serve women who are looking to find themselves really after divorce. But take us back to that, first marriage. And you say you kind of married too young. What were you hoping for or expecting first time round when you were entering marriage?
Oh, gosh, I think it's like everybody has this idea in their mind of that white picket fence and meeting your Prince Charming. And I thought I was young. I was in my 20s. So, it was just the thought of love and the forever after. And unfortunately, it didn't turn out that way. Luckily, we're still really good friends. We have to be because we have a daughter together. But yeah, I think it was more just the fairy tale like you expect when you're young.
Yeah, I think that's kind of commonly sold to us, really. I don't think we get an awful lot of preparation for marriage. And speaking for myself, it was just, you watch the movies and stories, and it's a very idealized version of somebody choosing me and the whole romantic notion of somebody proposed to me. And then there isn't this idea of me choosing from a place of fully knowing myself. Like, how well do you think you knew yourself as you were going into the first marriage? Or you were 22, 23, quite young.
Yeah. Do you know what? In all honesty, I didn't know myself at all. And even through the years, I didn't know myself until recently. And I'm in my 50s now. So it was, gosh, I didn't know myself at all, but I loved the idea of being in love. And I loved the idea of having that fairy tale. And when you're young and you're all in love, it's like I always used to say to friends of mine after I got divorced that should I have been given a manual on what marriage is actually all about, I wouldn't have got married. And I don't think a lot of people would get married if they actually know the amount of work that goes into it if you don't meet the right person.
Yeah. The over romanticization is so common. And then you got divorced after, was it 3.5 years or so in your first marriage? And so how did you sort of find yourself again as a newly single woman and kind of, put yourself back together again and kind of go out into the dating world again optimistically?
Well, you see, I think because it was so many years ago, we're talking what, 20 odd years ago, there wasn't anything like dating sites. So it was more of a meeting friends or meeting somebody through friends or potentially falling in love with somebody that you already knew. And my first marriage, one of the main reasons why I feel that it didn't work was because we were unfortunately blessed. When I say unfortunately, we were blessed with a child with special needs. So that caused major stress on us in our being as young as we were.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, we weren't right for each other, but that just caused major stress on us. And I think that put the pressures more so than people that didn't have children that had special needs. And when it came to my second, getting back out there, it was generally more just meeting up with people that ex-boyfriends or people that I had already known. And I went into it with the same mindset, the fairy tale, the white picket fence. Oh, this didn't work. Potentially this other one might work. And was extremely wrong with that because I landed up my second marriage being married to a narcissist and went through a really, really difficult time.
And you said as well when you came out of that, that was a very difficult time to be married to a narcissist. And you say that you noticed relatively early on. I think you said you were like 6 months in and you're beginning to notice there's something really off here.
You know, in all honesty, I knew right from the beginning that this wasn't a good match. But hindsight is a wonderful thing, is it not?
Absolutely.
And I look back and I go, bloody hell, Deborah, you knew, your gut feeling was telling you all along that you were making the biggest mistake of your life, but you didn't listen because I had this idea in my head that I could change him and that he would be okay and that he would change for me, you know? And when it got to the stage where, it was even before 6 months in, I started noticing the little signs of teaching me lessons because I wouldn't listen to his instructions or do the things that he wanted me to do. And I just ignored them because I thought they would get better. And then eventually they didn't get better. But then stupidly, I married him. You know, I even noticed these signs while we were still going out. We weren't even married yet. But like I said, hindsight's a wonderful thing. At the time, I was in my 30s and I had this idea of my biological clock was ticking and I needed to get married and I can change this person. And I'm just imagining these things. It's not what it seems. And when we got married, the tables turned and it flipped to complete mayhem. And that's why after 6 months of marriage, I left him. But he refused to divorce me. He would not divorce me until we were married for a year because he didn't want his friends to think any less of him.
Wow. It's amazing, isn't it? The number of outside signals that were, oh, my biological clock. Well, that's kind of an internal, but this idea in my 30s, I should be married. I should be having children. I should be able to fix this. I should just work harder. And maybe it's me. Maybe it's me and I just must try harder on my report card here, sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even when we got married, there were simple little signs like when we put our wedding bands on, he put it on the wrong hand, as if the universe wasn't trying to already tell me while I was standing saying my vows that this wasn't going to work. And we just laughed it off. And I was late for my wedding and I'm very punctual when it comes to timing. So that was unheard of. And I even remember my brother saying to me when he was driving me to the church and he said, "Are you sure you're making the right choice? Because I'm more than happy to turn around and take you home." And I
love your brother.
Yeah.
That's what you need.
Yeah. And I was like, no, I've spent too much money on this wedding. I can't let my friends down. So I was So I was getting married for the sake of, I've spent too much money on this wedding, not because this is the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. So I knew all the signs were there. I just did not listen. And that's when you want to slap yourself after the fact and go, if I'd only listened, I wouldn't have put myself through so much trauma.
Isn't it crazy, isn't that level of self-betrayal? And I think it's one of those, the sunk cost fallacy. I've already spent this much money, so I'll just keep investing in this thing that I already know is a bad investment. Or I can't let these other people down because then they might think this, that, and the other. I'm inconveniencing people who are waiting in the church, so I guess I'll sign up and marry this guy. And but we just kind of dismiss the kind of concern because we're just not used to trusting ourselves and and being on our own side and saying, no, that little niggle that you're feeling, that intuitive hit needs your attention. Slow down, slow down.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think we would save so much heartache if we just listened to our gut feeling.
Yeah, yeah. And then you married your soulmate. So many years later, you obviously had to get healthier and recover from that second marriage. And what shifted for you after coming out of that marriage before you met, your soulmate, love of your life?
I think it was more of I was adamant that I would never get married again. And I was adamant that I was not prepared to accept anything less but what my description of perfect would be. Nobody's perfect, but that was my whole, I'm not prepared to put up with that. If the signs come up, I'm going to listen to them. If I start getting that niggle, I'm going to listen to it. And in all honesty, I went for somebody that I would never normally go for. He wasn't my typical person that I would. When I first met him, we were set up on a blind date. And when I first met him, I couldn't stand the sight of him. He looked like an escaped convict because he had a shaved head, bless him. And he said that I was high maintenance and he couldn't handle my attitude, but that was my attitude. I'm not taking your nonsense. And it took about 4 years after our blind date before we got together. And that was generally because we got to know each other as people and as friends, because we hung around in the same group of friends. So we got to know each other as who we were and not what we were pretending to be to impress.
So a real honest relationship, vulnerability. This is me, warts and all, fully accepted and loved.
Yeah. And I was still adamant that I wasn't going to marry him. Even when he asked me to marry him, I said no. I laughed at him. I said to him, I told you I'm not getting married again. And he was like, yeah, but let's talk about this. And we sat and we spoke about it. And he convinced me that I need to look at things a little bit differently and not label him as the same as I would with anybody else that I'd been with. And I'm glad that I listened to him because he was my soulmate. But then he decided to unfortunately no longer be with us because he got cancer and passed away.
Yeah. And that was obviously a shock and a huge life change. Can you share with us how you navigated such a big sort of shock in your life?
Well, because he struggled with cancer for 5 years. So it wasn't the initial shock of discovering that he had cancer at 41 years old.
Wow, so young.
Was devastating in itself. But I think because he had 5 years or 4 years and 7 months to be exact, that he struggled with it, it was almost like it gave me the opportunity to be able to say my goodbyes. Yeah. So I'm not taking away from the grief that I went through, but I think because I was given the opportunity of spending the time with him and the devastating effect that cancer has on a human being and seeing the decline in him, in a way, I was grieving before he had even passed away. having to rebuild myself and find me again. And then COVID hit. And it was a matter of, okay, now I'm completely on my own. I have nobody around me. My daughter, being special needs, was put into the high risk category, so I couldn't even see her. And I had to be with myself. And I didn't know me. I didn't know me by myself. And I didn't like me, to be honest, because I was always looking outside of me for approval. I was always trying to please. I was a big people pleaser, always trying to please everybody else, always trying to do everything else to make other people happy, even if it meant I wasn't happy. And I didn't know who I was.
So do you feel that was kind of the rock bottom part, really, for you, that you were there suffering this loss, coming to terms with that grieving, and then realizing I don't know who really I am.
Yeah. 100%.
And I don't know whether what I see I like very much. How do you go from there, Deborah, to kind of, what's that journey like for you?
Well, the first thing was the realization that this person that I didn't know was actually me. And what I mean by that is somebody said to me, potentially start journaling your thoughts and your feelings because it'll help you work through them. So I started journaling, and after a couple of glasses of wine one night, I had that nudge, that gut feeling to reread my journal. And because I had learned to listen to my gut feeling, I reread the words that I was writing on the paper. And while I was reading this, the tears were rolling down my face because I felt so sorry for this poor woman that was writing these words. She was broken. She was totally lost. She didn't want to be here anymore. She didn't know who she was. She couldn't see a future ahead of her. Her whole life had been destroyed, and she literally was broken. And the realization that that woman was me was the turning point where I thought, I have a choice here. I can either no longer be here, or I can make changes in my life to start rebuilding me and to start loving me again. And that's what I did. That was the pivotal moment for me, where I realized that I had a choice. I could either go left or right, and I needed to make that choice.
That's so powerful. And you say sort of journaling saved your life. Your journal saved your life. And I think what you're describing there when you reread it will resonate with many people, because I journal as well. And I think often from my own experience, I'm almost unconsciously hiding from the version of myself that comes out on the pages. And so what you described there is like you're meeting yourself very intimately in a way that you haven't before. That's the magic of journaling, this real, raw honesty once you commit to it, because you're not hiding anymore.
Absolutely. And you're 100% correct there. It's so easy to write how we really feel down and then show a facade to the world on what we want them to see. And then owning our own story is the hardest part of it all. But I'm so grateful that I did. And it's taken me a couple of years. Don't get me wrong. It's 6 years since Darren's passed. It's taken me a couple of years, and I'm still rediscovering myself. But I'm so proud of myself for actually going, Debs, this is it now. You've got a choice to make, and you've got to do whatever it is that you can take to regain your life.
And I think you've made a really important point as well. It's not like you had one evening where you did a great journaling session and then you said, oh, awesome. Okay, I'm taking the right turn now. And then the sun started shining, and then there were rainbows and fairy dust sparkled over you and everything, because you were coming back you were really putting yourself back together again, beginning to know yourself, creating a loving relationship with yourself of compassion and kindness towards yourself And when Darren died as well, you were financially challenged because you were not left with life insurance, so you had to do some very sort of, okay, now,
Yeah.
the foundations are not as solid as I imagined and expected and hoped they would be. So that was an added stressor in the midst of the grief and all
And
of it.
I'm still paying that all off. It's when you're in your 40s, you don't think, what's the point of getting life insurance? We're still young, and he didn't have life insurance and left with debt. And I'm still paying that all off. But like you say, the financial burden alongside it, which affects so many people's lives, was one of the hardest, and still is. I'm work in progress. I'm not 100% healed, and I don't think I ever will be, but I'm so much happier and at peace and content with who I am because I love myself now. And I take one day at a time, and I've learned tools and techniques that have helped me along the way when I have those moments of doubt and those moments of, oh, bloody hell, it's so easy to go back to the way you used to do things. And just to be kind and say, don't be so hard on yourself, Debs. Take one step forward. And if you take a couple of steps back, tomorrow's another day and you try again.
And it is a deep process of healing, and it is one day after the next. And I love how you just demonstrate the compassion there, just in those simple words of, you take 2 steps back sometimes and only one forward. And you need to bring that compassionate self-love rather than the harsh voice of self-judgment. When you're working with people, women who are coming out of divorces and trying to reconnect to themselves again and find themselves in the midst of that, because it's very easy. You don't have to be married to a narcissist or to married to, have a terrible marriage to find yourself on the other side of that and feel like you don't really even know yourself without this person. What are some of the things that you find that you encounter most in your work that women present with as they come to you feeling like, how do I create this next chapter, Deb?
Yeah, well, when I originally started my work, I found working with women that had just got divorced or separated was quite a struggle because they were in survival mode. And they needed to get through the survival mode part first before they were able, not because they didn't want to, they wanted to, but before they were able to start digging deep to looking at what they can do to help themselves. So I found people need to be divorced for a little bit of time first before they're ready to be able to do the emotional healing and the stepping stones. But the biggest thing that I find first one is the loss of identity, because we're a mum, we're a lover, we're a friend, in my case, a carer. And we have these labels attached to ourselves where we feel our worth is through those labels. And now those have all been taken away. Yes, we're still a mum if you're a single mum, but we're no longer a partner. And the life that we once had has now diminished in front of us. And it's just finding our feet of where do we actually fit in?
So, yeah, go ahead.
And then the other one is the beliefs, like the beliefs that limit us, the beliefs that we hold on to, that we're not good enough, that we're not worthy enough, that there's got to be something wrong with us. And we start going through all of these different ideas in our minds that it was our fault and we could have done things differently, and having to pick or put the pieces back together on actually coming to terms with the fact that we are good enough. We need to own our authenticity and powerfully find a way forward by going, it wasn't my fault. It takes two people to make a marriage, and I need to find me to be able to feel confident and worthy enough to take forward. So it's literally the loss of identity and the beliefs that limit us from moving forward. And then the last one is no plan. You can have all these wonderful ideas, but you don't know how to do it. So you rather say, well, I just can't, I don't know how to do it. It's like anything when we learn a new skill, unless somebody gives us a step-by-step roadmap, we use the excuse that I don't know how to do it, so I stay stuck.
I think that's really important, that kind of mapping for people, and how easy it is to stay stuck in maybe that first sort of survival mode, and then thinking the belief part that you pointed, maybe this is as good as it gets. This is all I deserve. And they can't, and often they're not conscious beliefs as well. You're just 100%. Operating from it. And then that's what you're seeing in your life as a result of that belief. So you've been on your own journey. And as you've said, which I think I love that you're so authentic and real about it and humble about it, is that you're on the journey still. You're just steps ahead of the people that you're helping, because you have invested so much in your own healing journey that has put you in a place where you can now be of service to others who are just beyond that initial kind of survival stage and kind of almost like the trauma of the end of a relationship, right? And then they can be looking for your help. So when you think about your own healing journey, can you share a little bit about how that looked for you, and maybe some of the most powerful tools that you go back to again and again that serve you?
Yeah, with the greatest of pleasure. For me, I wouldn't have been able to start this journey at all had I not invested in myself to work with a mentor and to work with a coach, because I couldn't do it on my own. I didn't know what my shortcomings were because I was stuck in the mud. You know, we don't know what we don't know. And we only see things from our own perspective where we're at. And by working with a mentor, I actually worked with 2 mentors, or life coaches, mentors. They were able to help me see things from a different perspective and discover things in such a way that I was open to discovering more. And because I'd opened myself up to discovering more, my whole world opened up. And I then started discovering different tools like meditation, walking. You know, I come from South Africa. In South Africa, it's not safe to walk in the streets. So I lived in the UK for nearly 10 years before I went on a walk on my own. And it was only because of COVID that I was forced out to get out the house that I discovered I have a gorgeous canal down the road from where I live, but I didn't know it was there because I hadn't ventured out.
Wow.
And doing meditation, when I first started meditation, I felt like an absolute fool because I'd never done it before. But the big one for me was affirmations, starting to reprogram the way I felt about myself through affirmations, even though I felt like an absolute idiot when I first started doing them, because I didn't feel that way about myself. But I discovered the more I said them, the more I actually started believing them. And now I say them every single morning with a huge smile on my face. But when I started, it's like any new skill set that we learn. We have training wheels on a bike and as a baby when we start. And that's what it's like when it's personal development. So getting back to your question about what helped me, 2 mentors, and then using the tools like meditation, affirmations, walking to just be in nature and rediscover myself. And taking those skill sets and honing in on them to make them more powerful. And each day they get better and better and better.
Yeah, it's like compound interest, isn't it? When you're investing in yourself in that way. And you've described the journey beautifully, that it begins with this exploration and opening yourself up to work with a life coach, a mentor, as you just describe it, is an act of bravery as well. And it is stepping outside the, I don't need to do it all by myself, which it can be a real limiting belief in and of itself, that I'm not worthy of this investment. I should be able to work it out myself. And I think that keeps so many people stuck in that survival mode for much longer than they need to be. And then as well, like just allowing yourself to be the beginner, like the beginner's mind in meditation, realizing I'm sitting here, my eyes are closed, and all I'm thinking about is the grocery list and what I'm going to do afterwards. And is the bell going to ring? And it's only here for 5 minutes. I don't think I've had a moment. That's what it's like, isn't it? Beginning anything. And as I totally resonate with what you said about the affirmations too. I used to feel like a complete idiot. And I'm sure people listening will think, oh, is this the positive psychology, sort of like, believe it, you'll see it? And for some people that doesn't resonate. It gets really, really simple about be nice to yourself. Say something positive about yourself. It really is sort of a reclamation of power rather than waiting for the compliment from somebody else. When you're working with people, where do you find people have the most struggle when you're introducing them to these new tools?
So a lot of the time, depending on people's past beliefs, and, for me, I was brought up in the church. So having a family of, my brother was a pastor, and it was always brought to told to me that anything outside of the church would be considered evil. So I find if I'm working with a lot of people, for myself, my biggest struggle was to be open-minded to trying new things that potentially would not be considered. How do I say this in a polite way? Because I never mean to offend anybody, but not considered holy. And although it's helped me more in many ways. So I find depending on people's upbringing and their beliefs, it is dependent on how they struggle with being open to trying things that they might consider as woo-woo. There's a lot more research done around these things now, and from a psychological point of view, that they're actually helping with the subconscious mind and change the way that you feel. But the struggle is generally past beliefs. Sorry, I went off on a on a tangent there with answering that question. But yeah, it's past beliefs that interfere with people being open to trying new things.
Yeah, and it really feels like then you're introducing to somebody this sort of open terrain where they can almost pick up the pen and they get to write the beliefs that work for them, and that we're all of us carrying around this baggage of inherited beliefs that are in the driving seat. And such an important part of your work when people come to you and are open and receptive is that you're gently putting up a mirror to them so that they can see these blind spots and then begin to question, does this serve me? Or if I continue along this path, where will that bring me? And do I want to choose it? And that's, I think, a big part of like choosing yourself is like that you see clearly what's been running the show, and this belief that you might have picked up from. I remember doing this type of work myself and having a belief that was picked up from a primary school teacher, an elementary school teacher who had said something about me, and I was carrying it, and it was in the driving seat. And it's so powerful what you do when you help somebody to see that and to move on from it.
Yeah. And I do find that depending on the client, sometimes it takes people a short amount of time to be able to be open to that, acknowledge it, and allow new perspectives. Whereas other people, it takes them a lot of time, depending on childhood trauma or upbringing, all those different type of things, to be able to be open to it. So it's just changing your perspective, because there are so many different perspectives and how people see things.
And you've touched on another important message there as well when you talk about trauma and childhood trauma and just all sorts of struggles that people may have coming out that often, I guess, get more triggered when somebody has left a relationship, or a relationship is broken down, and they're trying to find themselves again. And you spoke to this a little bit, that people maybe aren't ready to work with a life coach initially,
Yeah.
or somebody with your specialism, and when they're in that survival mode, that there is a lot of work that needs to be done, sometimes in a therapeutic module, working with a therapist. And I've worked with people before where they come sometimes, and you feel like there's a lot of material here that really should be for a therapist. And sometimes I've just had to direct people into that lane. And then I have worked with people as well who are in therapy and working with the coach as well. And you just need to be clear about the lane where things belong. Yeah. How have you found that in your work?
I found it a few times where there's been clients that I knew needed more support that I was able to give to them, out of respect to them. Because even though I'm trained, double certified, trained as a life coach, when it comes to childhood trauma, I didn't feel comfortable or confident enough to go down that road. So I have actually collaborated with a trauma therapist. So that if I have clients that start working with me, that I'm able to pick up that there is more trauma here than I feel comfortable with asking them to expose to me because of not having the qualifications of a trauma therapist. I then bring my trauma therapist coach in to support, because it's out of respect for them.
Yeah, it's just really knowing where you serve and serving deeply in that area. And I know that there are lots of people who prefer to talk to a coach because they think, oh, I don't want to go to therapy, because that they have a belief about that. Yes. And I spend my time talking about the belief about what therapy means, rather than getting into material that has nothing to do with my area of specialism and where they're best served, just keeping that client center of your concern.
Because at the end of the day, like you've just said, the center of concern is our clients and their well-being and their potential life-changing transformation. So it's our duty of care, in my opinion, and I'm sure you'll support me on this, to make sure that we give our clients the best possible chance and opportunity for them to be able to work through the things that are really keeping them stuck. And if a therapist, we all fit into a category of requirements depending on the client that we're working with. So working hand in hand with a therapist and a coach and all of those things together, we all have our specific needs. And that's what's important to me. And I feel from my business perspective, it's being authentic and being real and true to the outcome of my potential client.
So when you think back on really your earlier sort of operating system of being more of a people pleaser, sort of those times of self-betrayal of, everyone's counting on me, or everyone's in the church, I better get married anyway. I've spent so much money on this wedding. I better go ahead. And, I think lots of people, Deborah, will be nodding along to that. It's embarrassing for us to admit to ourselves sometimes the signals that we just didn't listen to. I know somebody very well who has a very similar story to you about the I knew, and I was wearing the dress, so I thought we'd better just go ahead of it. But you went from that sort of people-pleasing, self-betrayal, not knowing yourself, to being at that lowest point of going, I need to go right or left, when you began your journaling journey. What do you think are some of the most important lessons that you've learned on this? Maybe your top 3 that you've learned that have served you in kind of becoming the woman who you are today, so much more authentic, true to yourself, self-compassionate.
I would definitely say setting boundaries is one of the biggest things for me, because of always being a people pleaser. And when I say setting boundaries, I was always under the illusion that boundaries was just a nice way of saying no. But boundaries for me is a way that helps me maintain self-love, because it means by setting those boundaries, whether it be to ex-partners, whether it be my daughter, whether it be work, whatever it may be, it means that I'm giving myself permission to put me first, because if I don't put me first, I'm not able to give my best to everybody else. But it's been a rocky road. I still find myself slipping back and going, okay, Debs, where's the boundaries? Start listening to your body. The biggest one was self-awareness, being able to really be aware of how I was feeling inside, instead of pushing it to the side. To be self-aware and acknowledge I'm having a bit of burnout, or I'm not able to give people what I've said I would be able to, and just being honest with myself. And then that helps you set the boundaries. And the biggest one for me was learning the response versus reaction rule. Instead of reacting straight away when something happens out of ego or emotions, to wait 3 days and respond, because the outcome is always different. It causes so less arguments and frustration and heartache. And so for me, awareness, boundaries, and the responding versus reacting rule.
Beautiful. And all three of those are so integral. They all are interwoven together, but you can't have them without the other pieces, and I think that first one is that self-awareness. It's that I see myself more clearly now. I know myself, which is so powerful.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful conversation. Just before we close up, I want to make sure I'll be adding this in the show notes. But people are going to want to know where they can connect with you and discover what you're up to. So if you could just share a little bit about that, Deborah, about where people can find you and what you're offering right now.
Yes, thank you. So my business name is Quietly Confident Woman, plural. And I'm on social media under Quietly Confident Woman on Instagram, on Facebook. I have a YouTube channel. I have my own podcast called Quietly Confident Woman Podcast. And I have a variety of different programs. If people are wanting to work with me one-on-one, my program is called Regain Your Life, because that's exactly what I had to do. And then if there's some wonderful ladies that are not ready to work one-on-one because they're potentially still in survival mode, I have on-demand trainings and self-study programs to help with affirmations and just build confidence. So there's a variety of different ways that people can have a taster of what it's like to work with me, and then eventually work with me one-on-one.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And if you could just leave us maybe with one last piece of encouragement or advice that you could give somebody who's maybe listening to this and is in that dark place of maybe their lowest point or trying to get unstuck and begin this journey, what are maybe some words of encouragement or wisdom that you would like them to take away with them today?
Adversity molds us into the woman that we are today, but it does not define us or have to control the rest of our lives and how we feel about ourselves. And there's a profound connection between self-love and confidence. And when you find that connection, that's when life changes.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us today, Deborah. See you all next time. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for choosing to spend this time with me today. If you enjoy the episode and it resonated with you, please consider subscribing and share this podcast with someone you know who would benefit from the message. If you'd like to take things a step further, you'll find some free and paid resources in the show notes. And until next time, in the unlikely event that no one has told you this yet today, let me have the profound honor of reminding you that you are truly magnificent and the world is a far better and brighter place because you are here with us all. See you next time.